Welcome to Astro Talk, Traditional Astrology. Today with a very special guest from the United Kingdom in Newport. Welcome, Philip Graves.
Thank you very much, Volker. Thank you for inviting me onto your Astro Chat. It's an honor to be here.
It's very great to have you. And Chris Brennan, in his talk with you, called you an astrologer. Would you agree on that term, that you are an astrologer?
Yes, I am, because I did study astrology properly and practice it,
Okay.
even though I don't do professional consultations.
So you are practicing astrologer in your free time, not with clients.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, now we have the homepage. We come back to the homepage later. There's a lot to see here and a lot to buy here and a lot to learn here. We come back to this later. You have a YouTube channel, and I was rather surprised. You have four interesting video interviews, but none of those interviews is on your personal channel. There is only on the interviewer's channel. Why is that?
And that's probably because I was happy for the interviewers to host them, and I didn't think of asking them for a copy of the source file. And
Well, that will be different with us today because you get the MP4 and you can work on it, or you can just publish it on your channel because my channel is a niche channel. You have to realize that.
thank you, Volker.
Okay, for the viewers, this is by far the most interesting interview Philip Graves gave to the these people, and I take off the sound. This is the Ad Astra project, which is an academic project run by, in those days, Helena Avila, who has deceased, unfortunately, and Luis Ribeiro. Are you still in contact with Luis?
Yes, I am. Yes, he's a good friend.
This is a very interesting video, and I have to do it in English because most people won't speak German. Okay. Um, how did this come about? How did you get in contact with these are two practicing astrologers from Portugal.
Yeah,
They learned with Robert Zoller and Sue Ward the
yes.
horary part, and you have to get in contact with Portuguese people to do this, or did they approach you?
They approached me. In fact, it's one of the fortunate things from, I suppose, from having networked on Facebook with other astrologers for so many years. And I think I've built up a little bit of visibility that way to the point that eventually quite a lot of people who are more serious researchers rather than just running their own little client businesses have come across something about me. And if they have a research interest, quite often they do eventually approach me. I'm not an outgoing person, I have to admit. I've never been an outgoing person, so I don't often make the first contact with people.
Okay.
But I think Helena probably added me as a contact on Facebook, and then expressed interest at some point after that in running one of these interviews on the Astra project
For the viewers, these two
channel.
people created a astrological school of traditional astrology in Portugal after the training with Suvorda in horary traditional and Robert Zoller's medieval astrology. And after their astrological school, went back to college, both of them more or less historians, bachelor degree, master degree, and they were both working on dissertation PhDs in the Warburg Institute with Professor Burnett in exactly the time they were interviewing you, which was the starting point in 20, it was 2020, wasn't it? In 2020, they started the Ad Astra project in coordination with the University of Lisbon and the Warburg Institute. And the board of the Ad Astra project, an academic project, is rather impressive. All the main academics on history of astrology are there, and in philosophy of science and history of science.
Mhm.
Um, in our email correspondence between the two of us, I asked you if you have ever been to the Warburg Institute Library, being yourself one of the most famous librarian in astrology contexts today, besides Jen Sard. And you said you have never been there, and you are not really
Correct.
interested in going to the Warburg Institute Library. Why is that?
No, I didn't say I wasn't interested in going to it, but I didn't think it would be straightforward to arrange to actually use it because they have this system
Oh,
of.
I remember. But that is not true because you know Luis Ribera and he knows he has the contacts. He could get you into that.
I mean, he could do possibly. The other thing is because I'm just constantly busy with my own projects, just taking the time out to go, and also because I've only been back in the UK since 2016, and until relatively recently, I was employed in Bristol. That's grounded me quite a lot, some distance from London. I just
Yeah, okay,
haven't
okay.
haven't taken the time to arrange anything like that. But the other point I did mention, which goes back to how you presented it just now, is that I don't think the Warburg Institute has that many sources on astrology that my library lacks. It does have um, some rare, very old books, but it doesn't have, in my opinion, nearly as much as far as modern material
That's
since
correct, yeah.
1700
And that's correct.
as I do here.
The researchers stop normally in the 18th century, and then that's
Yeah.
that. Okay, coming to your other interview. This is Michael Irvine. Okay. How did that come about?
Well, I've known Michael through the online community since around 2007. I think I may have emailed him initially, and he expressed interest at that time in the fact that I was building up this collection of books. I probably emailed him because I'd read about his Heart Center library that he still had at that time, and so he was quite curious to hear that somebody in Europe was doing something similar to him. And so he was one of my earlier sort of senior astrologer contacts, you might say, on Facebook before 2010. And so I've known him for quite a few years now. And he obviously, as you will know, he donated his library to the University of Illinois in the early 2010s. So he doesn't have that anymore, but he's still alive and he remains actively interested in how the astrological community is developing and what researchers are doing. So he invited me to have a chat with him for this podcast. So I was very happy to do that.
He's still alive?
I believe so. Well, he was last time I checked on Facebook, yes.
He must be how old now?
Probably around 80. I don't
Yeah, I
remember
think so, yeah.
exactly.
Okay, next YouTube, later than the Chris Brennan, but recorded earlier, is
Mhm.
this one. How did that come about?
I haven't known Leanne for nearly as long as I'd known Michael, but she connected with me sometime in the last few years on Facebook, and she started this series of interviews with other astrologers, and I happened to comment supportively on one that she published, and she mentioned she would be happy to do one with me too, so I agreed to that.
Okay, and now we come to the longest and most connected interview to this book because technically it is a video about your new book which was published in 2025. It's
That's right.
called Technical and Planetary Developments in Astrology: Grave Studies in the History of Astrology, Volume 1. And this is volume one of three volumes, which will be probably published on the same published press, which
Yeah,
is Revelor in United States. We come back to this aspect of it. And Chris Brennan, after the book was available public, he asked you to do a talk because you had been in contact for quite a while.
yeah,
But he and yourself wanted to wait. I think you wanted to wait for the video with Chris Brennan when the book was there, and the book is now there, and
correct.
he was talking with you about 3 hours. And I recommend. I have the book here. I don't know whether it's filmed with my camera on this technique today, but this is the book. Um, and you were talking about, well, let's say at least 2.5 hours about the content on the book and why you did it and how you did it and all the essays which are combined in this book. This book is a book of older texts of yourself, right?
Yes, older essays mostly, which were finally edited with a one or two updates towards the end of last year, but they date from 2016 to around 2021.
Why did you do it?
The
Why,
book,
why, why, why do this new book when the old texts are available, weren't they?
well, because first of all, the original essays were published all over the place, some in the Astrological Journal, some in Infinity Astrological Magazine, and one was a lecture. And there was also one which I'd submitted for publication in Infinity Magazine, but just then Infinity ceased publishing, so it never appeared. And it just seemed to me to make sense to compile my existing essays that were all over the place into a more accessible volume. I was aware also that Infinity magazine, though it was an excellent magazine, and I totally supported Smiliano Gavrancic's efforts. It didn't have a very, very wide reader base. So I think quite a lot of my essays that were published there are still unknown to people in the wider community. And I, I made a proposal, I think it was in 2020 to, or perhaps it was 2021, it was one of those 2 years to combine my existing essays and lectures into a book. And I approached Jen Zarp with the idea. Initially, I was thinking because she is connected with Sophia Centre Press that they might want to publish it. And in the event, she offered to publish it through her publishing outlet, Revelor. And it took a few years to come to publication for various reasons, not least of which were her extensive commitments over the last few years. But it was a blessing in disguise in one respect, which is that between the time that I wrote the essay on the development of sun sign forecasting and the final publication of the book, my friend Kim Farnell discovered another source of an early sun sign column, which had been unknown at the time I wrote the original essay, and communicated that to me in 2024, just in time for the final edit. So that means it's now actually more accurate than it would have been if it had gone to print a few years ago.
So for the viewers, just a little bit of information about the contact. It has parts. Part one is the evolution of the astrological houses and astrological aspect theory. Chapter one is from Manilius to modernity. Chapter two is from Kepler to Eddy. Chapter three, where's three? Part two. Okay, part two. And there's chapter three, the rise of the sun, the natal sun emphasized. Chapter 4, the early history of sun sign forecasting and newspaper astrology. Chapter 5, the earliest astrological conceptualizations of the planet Uranus. Then 6, when did astrologers first associate Neptune with Pisces? And 7, the first published assessment on the sign rulership of Pluto. And chapter 8, the last chapter, Lilith in astrology. We come back to the book in a second, but first, let's talk about this. Okay, you are friends with Maurice McCann,
Yes.
like with some other research astrologers. How did your connection with Maurice McCann came about?
It was quite funny actually because we were both bidding on an eBay auction for a two-volume first edition set of Alfred Pierce's textbook of astrology, which you may be aware that was originally published in 1879 for the genethliacal part, and 1889 for the part on all other branches of astrology. And all subsequent editions were abridged. So the first edition remains highly sought after. And he was bidding for that at the same time as me. And at that time, eBay had not yet made the identities of auction bidders private. So I could see who I was competing against. And he won the auction because he was more determined and he bid $300, I think. And so he got the originals. And I made friendly contact with him from there, and he then heard about my collection and the other books I had. And when he was doing his MA dissertation for his MA with the Sophia Center, which was on, I think it was related to changes in the orbs for aspects, he didn't have access to all the sources I already did by 2006, including some early volumes of Modern Astrology magazine. And so he asked for my help with some sources on that.
And this education of Maurice McCann at the Sophia Center is an online course, I believe. Did he ever come to the Sophia Center?
I imagine he probably did because he was based in London, I believe, and the Sophia Centre at that time, when he was alive, still was based in Bath, which isn't far away. They would have
Yes,
had annual summer schools. He almost
yes.
certainly was there.
Do you know the background, the kitchen news, to put it this way,
Mhm.
Gerüchte. Um, do you remember the development of the Sophia Center? You have been in Sweden in those days.
Yeah.
It was in Bath University, and then it was no longer in Bath University. And there's a lot of rumors. What happened? Did the administration hate Nicholas Campion, so he had to leave, or what? Do you know anything about this kitchen information?
I mean, I only know what Nick has told me himself, and he's a friend of mine. I wouldn't want to repeat sordid rumors if there were any, but I haven't actually heard any sordid rumors. I've only heard that from Nick that the Bath Spa University pulled the plug on the course, and I think he felt very let down by the
Yes,
administration there himself,
yes.
and he had to scout around for another university that would be willing to host the course so that it could continue, and it found its home then with the University of Wales Trinity St David.
Is it true that Lampeter World's Trinity College in Wales is a university which is one of the oldest universities of your country, I believe, um, that this university is specializing in online courses to keep up the university because it's so distant. I believe the Lampeter is a town of 2,000 inhabitants, not rather large. Is it true that this is a concept, an economic concept of the university to do a lot of online courses? So it was the ideal place for the Sophia Center.
I don't know if that was actually Nick's thinking at the time that he went to them, but it certainly has worked out very well that they do have a lot of they do have the facility for a lot of online teaching, and they're happy to run courses that way, given that the intake for Nick's course is quite niche, and therefore it's advantageous to attract students who couldn't commute to a
Yeah.
single point or perhaps move there for the duration of residential course. I mean, can you imagine even if it was a course in a traditional university city, such as Bristol um, or Oxford or London, because of the niche nature of the course, trying to attract enough students for a residential course in that area would be relatively difficult. And I think it's thrived because of the online teaching dimension, allowing a much wider intake of students than would otherwise be possible.
Now, one question. You are friends with Nicolas Campion. You're
Yeah,
friends with Gensart. Both are
yeah,
affiliated with the Sophia Center. Gensart is even a part owner of Sophia Press Center today, I
yeah.
believe. We come back to Gensart in a minute. Did it ever occur to you that this might be the time to do an MA in astronomy, cosmos and culture and astrology?
I mean, I thought about it, but first of all, I was in Sweden. My budget was tight, and I had to
No, I'm talking
prioritize.
about today because
Okay,
because
okay, more recently, fine.
Jen's
Yeah.
art is more recent. Nicholas Camping is a little bit longer. So
Hmm.
you're friends with Nicholas Camping when he was still in Bath. But even though nowadays, 2025,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be the right thing to do?
I mean, it would be a possibility. It's really a question of whether it would be worthwhile in terms of my own future aspirations. If I wanted to teach in academia, it would be essential to go a route like that.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah,
Otherwise,
for
I have
for
to
the
think
for,
about the cost.
for
And
the viewer in the United
yes,
States, if you have an MA of the Sophia Center in Lampeter and the certificate says Cosmos, Culture and Astrology, and in the legal aspect of the United States states is that if you have a master degree and you are allowed to teach what is said on the certificate. So everybody who has passed the master's degree of Lampeter and coming from the United States formally has the legitimate approach that he could teach astrology in high school. I don't know about England. Is that the same in your country?
I don't know specific related to the master's degree, but I do know that to teach at university would need really not only a master's, but also a follow-on
PhD.
PhD. So,
On university, you need a PhD, but the teaching in schools might be master, might be sufficient. Okay, now we're coming back to the
well,
book because I have a lot of questions about the book. The first
okay,
question is, in my opinion, which doesn't count at anything, because I'm a lawyer and not an academic astrology researcher like you are. But from my legal point of view, I would say this book is on an academic level,
okay,
considering the footnotes and considering all that. So Revelor Press wouldn't be my first choice because there is Sophia Press, which is publishing on academic papers. Did
right.
you discuss with Gensart to publish in Sophia Press and not Revelor?
Yes, that was my initial suggestion, in fact. And Jen had this idea though, because I don't remember if at that stage she had already got involved with Kepler College to some extent, or if she planned to. But she had this idea that perhaps it isn't even related to that, but she had this idea that it would be a good book for Revelor Press to publish. And she did also mention, incidentally, that the Sophia Center Press books, first of all, because they're very niche, they don't sell a lot of copies. And secondly, because they mostly serve the career development of aspiring academics who want to have a book published by a university press that supports then their tenure of a position in a university subsequent to that. They don't actually pay the author much, if anything at all, in terms of royalties, whereas Revelor Press has a model of paying royalties to authors, and so she recommended personally that I would get it published with Revelor for that reason.
Okay, we come back to Gensart in a minute now. We're going back to your book. Now, I have a critique.
Mm-hmm.
I love the book, but I
Mm-hmm.
certainly have a massive critique on one page.
Okay.
And that is the chapter of Kepler, chapter
Yeah.
2 from Kepler to Eddy, and that is on page 30, 63.
Mm-hmm.
And you dare to write the amateur astrologer Johannes Kepler. Are you out of your mind? He was no amateur. He was a professional. He had more than 1,000 horoscopes. He was in mail contact with astrologers all over the place. He especially had a friend in East Ostfriesland. How did you come up with this wrong, the amateur astrologer? How did that get into your head?
I think because I was thinking from the point of view of his primary area of renown, which was in scientific and mathematical
So
circles.
you are bowing to today's thinking of Kepler because that is a wrong impression. Johannes Kepler was an astrologer first and foremost, and an astronomer second for Rudolf II. And to give the viewers a clear picture, Johannes Kepler was a very heavy professional astrologer. Would you agree?
Well, as you put it that way, yes, I agree. And I would be happy to suggest an amendment for future
It was
printings
just I was
along
just
those
joke
lines.
I was just joking with you. It's not really important. I was just happy to have something to
No,
prove.
that's fine. You know, I appreciate all feedback, and no, you do raise a valid point. I was probably just referring to him for economy's sake as an amateur astrologer because his reputation is so much in the area of astronomy and mathematics that
Yes, yes, yeah. He
from the point of view of how he practiced in astrology and why he practiced astrology, from the point of view of most academics, I would say probably today, that would have been a kind of sideline interest of his rather
because
than his main
that's easy to explain because
area.
they don't like the idea that Kepler was a professional astrologer because
Sure.
it
Yeah.
disturbs the public that this famous guy was an astrologer and he was the astrologer of Rudolf II in Prague, which is the Kaiser Rudolf. But going back to some questions about your personal view of the world and astrology.
Mhm.
I have the theory that the grand masters in assassinating the divine moment of astrology were Ptolemy, Cardano, Kepler, Morinus, Lilly, Alan Leo, Charles Carter, Witte, Thomas Ring, Peter Niehenke, Landscheid, and Gokler, and so on. What is your position? You have all this research in the history of astrology, so you know all these people I just mentioned. You know that they discarded a lot of what is in Vettius Valens, that they got rid of the Dodecatemoria of Manilius, that they don't like the bounds and the decans, and they don't use them. Is this way of putting it into English, the grand masters in assassinating the divine moment of astrology, and people who know what this divine moment of astrology is Geoffrey Cornelius. What is your opinion of these people? Did they assassinate the divine astrology?
I think that is probably a too emotive way of putting it because assassination, it suggests that they were deliberately setting out to destroy it and so that it would have no life at all. I do think that throughout the history of astrology, there have been individuals who've had their own ideas about how to develop astrology that have gone against the grain of tradition. And these are some examples. They're not even the only ones. I mean, if you're looking at Gorkala, then you have to think about Paul Schwaznar, for instance, as
Yes,
well, who
yes.
was a precursor
It's
to him,
I
and
can
Karl Kraft.
I can complement the list
Yeah,
with your with the book of yourself, which is in the content in chapter 2. We have a lot of people: James Wilson, Zatkiel, Cheney, Llewellyn George, Richard Morrison, Cheney, Frederick Lacy, Robert Cross. This is all in your book that you talk about these
yeah.
people. Alfred Pierce, George Wilde and Dodson, Cefaria, Karl Brandler Pracht, to mention. These are all people who, I agree with you, they didn't want to assassinate astrology, but they found it necessary to get rid of a lot of the old astrology, to be modern, to be scientific, especially Peter Niehenke and Thomas Ring, Revision der Klassik. Um, but in the end, they were losing God. They were losing God in astrology.
Yeah, and that's an interesting perspective, I suppose. Probably throughout the history of astrology, but certainly throughout the history of modern science, astrologers have varied in their approach to the subject, as you know, and some have wanted to adapt astrology in ways that are compatible with the modern scientific worldview. Others have decided to completely ignore or bypass the modern scientific worldview and have come up with some really more extremely esoteric and unusual belief systems than the original astrologers of the Hellenistic period did. And so I think that it isn't just in one direction that there has been change. There have been these esoteric systems of astrology in modern times as well, which are really quite different from the ancient um, approach to astrology. So I think the fact of the matter is that every astrologer who is motivated to write a book is a thinker on some level and will have opinions of their own. And some of them will be much happier with the traditional uh, manners of the ancient astrologers than others. But there's also been a loss of communication at various times in history of the ancient techniques and even the medieval techniques. And for instance, in the early modern period, there was this widespread belief, as I think I talked with Chris on his podcast the other day, that Ptolemy represented the true original astrology, and that all these things, such as the parts and lots, were a kind of deviation um, from the correct astrology, and they therefore sought to strip them all out. So it isn't just in terms of modern science. The rationale has also been sometimes in the past, at least, that Ptolemy represented the original method, which of course is wrong.
Coming to your personal view, you are sort of an agnostic in your research, right? You don't
Yes,
take
yeah.
positions. So, how do you see the difference between Manilius, Dorotheus of Sidon, uh, Firmicus Maternus, and the Arabs on the one hand, and Ptolemy on the other hand? Because there is a difference between Vettius Valens and Ptolemy living in the same century, in the second century, Anno Domini. Um,
Mhm.
you are an agnostic. Are you so consequential that you don't have any opinion who was right and who was not?
It depends how you define right or
Well,
not.
let's
Yeah,
take Vettius Valens and Ptolemy. We
yeah,
both agree zodiacal releasing doesn't exist in Ptolemy, but it exists in Vettius Valens.
yeah,
The Dodecatemoria of Manilius exist in the Manilius poem, but they do not exist in Ptolemy, right?
yeah,
And on the other hand, Firmicus Maternus is saying in each chapter, if you don't delineate the Dodecatemoria, you don't know what you're doing. So there is a real gap between Ptolemy being the Bible of the astrologers in the Renaissance, Ptolemy, nothing else, basically.
mhm, mhm,
And we throw out everything else. We
yeah,
throw out Bonatti, we throw out all the errors with their lots and all that. And I understand that you probably need the agnostic approach you have because it would make life more difficult for your research if you had an opinion. Instead, you stay distant as an academic has to do.
yeah,
You
yeah,
are in the wrong profession. You should be in university with that approach. That approach is a typical academic approach, as you would agree.
yes.
So even though no personal approach at all, are you really so consequential? If you have to decide, I take Ptolemy or I take Vettius Valens.
Okay, well, if it comes to my personal enjoyment of reading the texts,
Yes.
I would definitely say that I find Vettius Valens far more interesting than Ptolemy. Vettius Valens has far richer range of techniques, and they're endlessly fascinating to experiment with. Ptolemy was a rationalizer. He he sought to strip astrology down to a kind of core that he thought made rational sense. And it's also questionable to what degree he was even widely enough educated on the astrological tradition to actually be aware of all the other techniques. I don't know for sure whether he had read um, books by, for instance, Nekepso and Petasiris and Hermes, or the ones that are attributed to them. The sort of forerunners of the Vettius Valens approach. Um, or not, or whether he had access to a very limited range of knowledge in the first place, because he was an encyclopedist, and astrology was just one of many subjects he tackled, and he's much better known for things, certainly much better known in academia for things like his work on geography and his star catalogue. And so one might reasonably object to Ptolemy that he wasn't an astrological specialist, and therefore he isn't a reliable source on astrology.
Okay, now you mentioned something which is very important for me because I
Yeah,
have a belief system like many people have. I'm not as agnostic as you are.
yeah,
Certainly not. I'm a strong believer in basically I believe astrology till the 13th century and the rest is rubbish, but that's my belief
okay.
system. Um, Nehepso series, we both know there is no real proof that they existed. There is no real document that proves was written by them. How is your belief system about Nehepso series?
I mean, I'm evidence led when it comes to historical research. So I think it's plausible. We don't have enough evidence, as you say yourself, because no primary documents, no primary manuscripts from them have come down to us. We can only rely on the hearsay and the second-hand documentation in the ancient manuscripts that do survive about them and who they were, and decide for ourselves how reliable those records, those second-hand records, are. I think it's it is logical to suppose that at some point in ancient history there was a line of astrologers who were particularly influential upon the learning of astrology um, by their successors, and who would therefore have very much set the tone for how it was done before diversification then ensued after that. Um, but it's also equally plausible that at different in different parts of the world, um, independently of each other, different stargazers would have come up with their own approaches um, to an astrological interpretation of what they see in the sky. So um, I'm perhaps being a little bit more general than you wanted from me there, but there's just some considerations of possibility that I would like to keep an open mind about the undocumented parts of ancient astrology.
Okay, now let's get back to your book,
Okay.
which is really readable and very nice to read, but you have a lot of chapters about the new planet, the Trans-Centurion planets.
Yes.
And this starts with chapter 5 when you talk about Uranus,
Yes.
then chapter 6 about Neptune, and chapter 7 about Pluto. There is an English person, Sue Ward. Do you know Sue Ward
Yes, I
personally?
do. Yeah.
Have you talked about her? Well, this is a German translation of a text by Sue Ward, The Fundamentals of Astrology, and in this book, she is talking about how the history goes, how Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto got their significations. Do
Mm-hmm.
you know that work of her?
Um, I don't think that exists as a book in English. I
No, it
think it
doesn't. It's
may
only
be
a,
from essays of
no. You
hers.
can buy the
Yeah,
PDF on her homepage. And
right.
strangely enough, she didn't publish this important text, which is available on her homepage to buy by PDF. She has a. Is my is the talk true that Sue Ward hates publishers
I don't know anything about that, and
or is very reluctant to publish with publishers?
I wouldn't know anything about that. And
Okay, so let for the viewers, this book, which is
yeah,
available in German, and you can buy it here if you want to have it in German, and it's only 20 euros. But what she does is she criticizes how the astrologers of the time since 1781 did attribute, to the new planets what we now think is what the new planets are.
Right.
In your book, you have 3 chapters on this.
Yeah.
Well, you basically talk about rulership and things like that and domiciles. But the whole question is the critique of Seward is basically it started with Alan Leo and his theosophical background, and they just, in Seward's opinion, they invented things. And then they found the mythology, and they just took the mythology and the names of the gods, and what Uranus was in the mythology is what Uranus is on an astrological planet. If you look from today's point of perspective, the way they did it, the critique of Seward is correct, but it seems to work. So my opinion, and I want to have your opinion on my opinion, I have the opinion it was absolutely not correct what they did in history. And then, in my esoteric opinion, the people doing Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in their astrology, they created an egregor of each planet or an archetype. The people created an archetype of each planet, or in the esoteric tradition, an egregor, and then the egregor was developed. And people thought about Uranus the way falsely was attributed. In my opinion, it was not okay what they did. They just invented things out of mythology and out of thin air, out of theosophy especially. But then something happened strangely. Many people followed this attributions of these 3 planets. Then egregors were created. They developed. They become bigger and influential. Then they became archetypes. And nowadays, in the year 2025 at least, if you look at the transits of Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune, you get the feeling, irrespective how they got their attributions by the astrology communities in those days in 1781, today they are forces which work exactly like they were attributed to. What's your opinion on my thesis?
How you put it, it reminds me quite a lot of what Liz Green has been on the record as saying before about how archetypes develop and they tap into the collective consciousness, which then somehow has a sort of feedback loop effect. Would you say that is true? You're close to her position on that,
Yeah,
Volker?
I think we're talking about the same thing.
Okay.
But the basis is the critique of Seward is correct. What
Not
Alan Leo
quite,
did
not
is
quite the way you quoted. I mean, I haven't read this book in German yet of hers, and obviously,
so what basically says here, Alan Leo started to invent things, and then other astrologers took the mythology and added it to the invention of the Theosophist approach. The Alan Leo and his community, they had a lot influence on how to interpret these 3 planets. That is historically a fact. But then the mythology comes added to this, and so basically they establish something, and then the archetypes gets developed by people. The people create the thesis of Liz Green and myself is the archetypes are something which can come into being. It's not a static thing.
okay. Well, the first point I would have to dispute that this was how the meanings of Uranus and Neptune came about. I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to all the way through my talk with Chris, but that was one of the points that
Yeah,
we
I
discussed.
listened to the
Okay,
video.
and that
I disagree with the video.
right. Well, Uranus and Neptune, their discovery both predate Theosophy for a start. So it
Uh,
has nothing to do with
Yeah,
Alan Near.
yeah. Wait a minute. That's different. Okay, I agree. Obviously, I have to agree that the astrologers of the 18th century were not theosophists because the theosophy was created in 1875. Now, the argument is they got into the mythology, and then Alan Leo comes on top of that, and then you get this soup of different cooks.
Okay, one of the things that came up in my discussion with Chris was the fact that when astrologers of the late 18th, 19th century were studying Uranus, they still knew it as Herschel, and there were no myths associated with the name of the
That
discoverer,
that
but
is
they
correct.
still came up based on observations, based on empiricism with observations. Therefore, it wasn't based on mythology at all. So
I
this is
agree.
this is
I
where
agree. I agree
okay,
on
so you
that
can
part.
accept that.
This part of your book is wonderful. No question about that. But what we think of Uranus today,
Mm-hmm.
2025, is a soup which was started with your chapters on Uranus and Neptune and
Okay.
those astrologers, and then the soup was cooking. Then Ellen Leo come and put a lot of ingredients, a lot of vegetables into the soup, and then they developed something, a mixture which has nothing to do with history at all, but it was just invention put into the soup of the real empiricism beforehand.
Another point I'll have to dispute is the central role of Alan Leo in all of this, because he was more a symptom of the prevalence of theosophy in his day than he was the progenitor of it.
Okay, I agree on that.
And for instance, already before his first book, Practical Astrology, was published in 1897, there had already been this major move towards an astrology that's much more focused on the sun and the moon by Hiram Erastus Butler of the Esoteric Fraternity in Boston, whose book Solar Biology introduced this system in 1887. And that is 3 years before Alan Leo becomes a magazine editor, and nine or 10 years before he writes his first book. And the esoteric fraternity, I would say that Butler founded and run, was an example of the kind of esoteric organization that sprung up in the wake of Blavatsky and Theosophy, even though it wasn't directly affiliated to Theosophy. So there was a whole lot of esoteric thinking going on. Leo was much more somebody, in my opinion, who looked around at all the things that were happening around him, all the ideas of astrologers in the United States and in the UK, and he would take bits of everything and publish it. And he particularly, because perhaps particularly after he married Bessie Leo, who was a theosophist at the time he met her already, he particularly wanted to promote the esoteric side of astrology, but he had time for other parts too. And that was why he published books by astrologers such as H.S. Green and Alfred Barley, who wrote on quite traditional topics like mundane astrology and directions and so on, primary directions in the case of Heinrich Darth as well. Death. Sorry, I think you pronounce him Heinrich Death.
No, but what you're saying is
Yeah,
basically the cooking of the soup reflects what I said.
okay.
You're on the page that there was a soup cooking and there was added esoteric ingredients.
Definitely, definitely. That was added. And also, by the time that Pluto was discovered, the esoteric approach was quite widespread, and which is reflected, in my opinion, in the immediate attribution in 1930 of meaning to Pluto and suggested domicile to Pluto in connection with ancient mythology and the name Pluto and all that implies, whereas this did not happen at the time of either Uranus or Neptune being discovered. So the culture had definitely changed as a result of theosophy, but it wasn't, I would say, it wasn't Alan Leo doing it by himself. There were all kinds of people doing
Okay.
this.
Okay.
Isabel Pagan's book, for instance, that was published in 1911.
Probably Sue Ward is a little bit fixated on Alan Leo. I agree on that. But coming back to the foundational question,
Okay,
as you mentioned, Liz Green, and I think she's on the same page,
yeah,
we have the historical fact that the attributions to these new planets is somewhat a murky story historically.
yeah,
And a lot of probably esoteric inventions is involved as well. We will never know how much esoteric wise wisdom was used because neither you nor I are initiates, I suppose. Are you initiate into
No,
esoteric? And neither am I. Well, I was with the Rosicrucian order for 22 years, but I would never say I was initiated as the term means. So basically, we are talking about probably human inventions. But then something strange happened. It works, right?
and that's one way to interpret it. I think in practice, it's not all one thing or another. With Uranus and Neptune, initially it was more the empirical basis to study before the myths were brought in by later generations and added to that in the works that were then published on those in the 20th century. In Pluto's case, the mythology was there right from the start. And Volker, there's just been a knock on my door. Can we pause this just for a
Uh,
moment?
I stopped the recording. Okay, recording. So we restarted the recording, and we probably can leave the subject of whether Liz Green and myself saying there is an archetype or an egregor being created by people. Let's go back to your life today. In the background of this video, we see your top floor of your house.
This is part of the top floor, that's right, yes.
First question to your house. Is it rented or did you buy it?
I bought it.
Very good, because Jens Arthur said if you rent a library, that's horrifying. Okay, this is the top floor, and this is because you recently got the library of the Astrological Association of Great Britain, correct?
Yes, it's been stored here in part or in whole since 2020 and almost in whole since 2022.
And the reason why it's only on the walls is because otherwise your floor would break down if you put books in the middle.
There would be a risk of that. As you can see, I do now have a half height
Yeah, yeah.
bookcase here.
So you're
Um,
risking the collapse of your house.
if I had full height bookcases in the middle, I possibly would do. It's
Okay.
not a chance I'm willing to take. Fortunately, it's quite an old house with very thick wooden joists, so I
Okay.
think it's sound.
Um, Personal question. We don't have to discuss all the legal aspects of the
Okay.
library of astrology because in other videos you talk about it.
Yeah.
Um, do you do a self-exploitation for hosting this library, or do you get some money for doing it?
I do not get money for holding the library here. I did it basically because it was I was suggested by Chris Mitchell and Nick Campion, and because they're friends of mine in the community. I didn't want to let them down when the library was going to need a new home. And at the same time, I do have an incidental benefit, which is that as the AA's librarian, I get to go to all the AA's conferences without charge for the time being, at least, which means that I'm able to afford that, whereas previously I couldn't actually afford the annual conferences in the budget I had because I was prioritizing books.
So it's a semi-self-exploitation.
If you want to put it that way, that's an interesting,
Okay.
interesting turn of phrase.
Now, did you ever apply for a grant by Urania Trust or Soviet Trust?
Yes, I applied once for a grant by the Urania Trust, and that was when the Astrological Association library was moved in, and there were costs related to fitting it out. Unfortunately, I don't think a decision was ever reached on that, and then so nothing happened. So I've just absorbed that cost myself, the cost of the bookcases and so on that were built in shelving.
Uh, you are in a sort of similar situation like Jen Zart, PhD, creating the Zaley library. How is the full title of Cayley? Cosm
Kaylee something research.
Cosmology, astrology, literature, anything.
Yeah, I'd
She,
have to look
she,
that
she
up.
she has a library like yourself, and she bought the
Yeah.
house herself.
Mm.
She established something like a Patreon system to get some money for people who think she's doing a good work. You haven't established some sort of online crowdfunding for what you're doing. Do you consider that?
I do have a Patreon account, but it's not very visible yet, partly because when I first set it up, I was still working in Bristol at the time, and so I didn't really feel I had the time resource to offer a lot that way. So I just have a handful of small handful
Is
of
it on your
supporters I'm grateful
homepage, your
for.
Patreon thing?
Um, I think there's a link. Yes, there's a link on the homepage, just there. If you look to support our library, just I can't point on your screen, but
Let me,
if
no,
you
okay.
just
This
no,
service.
sorry, you have to scroll down the text on the homepage itself, just above, higher, down, down a few
On
paragraphs.
the home, okay.
No. Within the text on the body of that page that you're on,
This
if you
one.
just no, yes, you're already on the home page. If you read down, if you scroll down a few paragraphs there, it says support our library and follow our work. Do you see just
Ah,
above?
this one.
That's it.
This.
That's it.
Well, you should change that. You should do a large title of that. And this is something different from what Jen Sard is doing. She is not on the Patreon business. Well, she might be, but
Mm,
she has a special approach that people can become members of the library by paying a small amount of money. Is that correct?
that's correct. Yes.
Do you think of that as well?
Potentially, it's a little bit different in terms of the logistics because Jen's library is based in a part of the United States which is close to two major population centers that are frequented by astrologers, Portland to the south and then Seattle to the north. And so it's easier for her to attract significant numbers of visitors, particularly I imagine around the time of year that the NORWAC conference is held in Seattle every year. There's probably quite a lot of crossover from that. And she offers various digital services as well through that. I mean, it's something along those lines I've considered, um, but it's partly just down to organizing it and having other things which have been going on that I've been focused on the last few years, such as completing my books currently, and then previously, obviously, I have my job to do as well. So it is potentially something that could be done. However, at the moment, there's a big project underway with the Astrological Association to develop a sort of subscription based digital library that they will be hosting.
Okay. Uh, do you have an account where people can donate money, just simply donate?
I think there's a PayPal donations link somewhere on the site. If you go under about on the homepage, sorry, and then it says donate there. So there is a
So
link
if people
there.
want to help you and support you in your work, you can donate. And
Yes,
is the account here, or there's a PayPal donation? Okay,
that's right.
you click on this button, and you have a PayPal account. If they don't have a PayPal account, how can they donate?
Then if they don't have a PayPal account and they don't want to use Patreon, they could directly contact me and I could give them my bank details.
What email address would they use for that? Is
They
there
could
e
use either the one you see above there, which is my personal Gmail address. Sorry, it was further down towards the
where
bottom of that page in blue, just towards the bottom of the page, just there.
this one?
That's what that one. Yes, that will
So,
work fine.
so either people can donate via PayPal, or they can mail you on solgo75gmail.com. Okay.
That would be fine. Yes,
So
if they wanted
anybody
to.
listening to this video, and how do you explain that not so many astrologers in the United Kingdom or in Europe
Mhm.
are supporting you?
I think it's partly because my website was only launched, although I'd been collecting for a long time, my website was only launched at the end of 2014. So that's about a decade. And because I was so busy with my job to make sure I could continue collecting and also support myself for the last most of the last 8 or 9 years. I haven't actually actively solicited support. Um, and I also felt that I really needed to do more by way of publishing my own research to for people to see an illustration of the value of the library in itself as a resource.
Okay, coming back to your book, the last chapter is Lilith.
Yes.
Now, for the German-speaking public, we have a lot of books. I have shown one of the first in Germany, which is 1994,
Yeah.
by Lianella Livaldi Lawn, and then is the famous professor of religious science in Groningen, nowadays Coco von Stuttgart, who published long before his stellar career in academics
That's
in
right.
1997, Lilith. And German-speaking people can find a lot of books in the rather well-known astrological publishing site Astronova. Um, the question I have for your chapter on Lilith is my impression correct that Lilith is a more European phenomenon and not so much an US or hyphen UK phenomenon?
If you're talking about the Black Moon Lilith, you're correct. Yes, that was very much adopted by continental European astrologers from the time that Don Neroman came up with the concept in the 30s onwards. Um, that it's been very popular in France and also, as you say, in Germany, probably in the Netherlands too. I don't know so much the culture there.
And this black moon has a fourth dimension, which is not in your chapter. You have three aspects of Lilith, which is astronomical, second moon, and an asteroid, and the apogeum. But
Yeah.
you don't mention the second focus of the moon ellipse. Why is that?
Um, when you say the second focus of the moon ellipse,
Well, that's Lilith for many people in Germany nowadays. The Lilith is the second focus of the ellipse of the moon.
okay, but
It's not the apogeum in the nowadays Lilith focused people.
you have to tell me because I'm not an expert on lunar astronomy. Are they not in the same place, those two things?
No, they have the moon has an elliptic circle around the Earth,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah,
And every ellipse in geometry has two focuses, a left one, a right one, okay?
yes.
And the right one ellipse point is used for Lilith nowadays in geometry. So that's new for you.
Not entirely because, but I've come across references to the second focus being in the same place as, and therefore effectively indistinguishable astronomically from the apogee.
Well, the apogeum is on the ellipse itself, you know,
Okay,
the longest distance from Earth. But we don't have to discuss this for now.
okay.
I was just
It's a
wondering
subtle,
about,
no, it's a subtle nuance. I have come across references to the
yeah,
different definitions, but as I say, one of the sources I looked up said they were actually in the same place. So it was
yeah,
really a matter of words, how you
yes, yes.
define its astronomical
So,
basis.
do you want to talk about something else about your book at the moment? Something
Um,
special?
I
And
mean,
about the coming books, probably, about book two
okay,
and
well,
and most intriguing, with Revelor Press, you're talking about three books, which is this first volume and two and three. But you're
yeah,
talking in some place about a fourth book,
right.
History of Astrology. When I read that, I thought, is he crazy? He wants to compete with Nick Campion?
No, I don't want to compete with Nick Campion. No, no, this was really something that just come about more or less by accident. Last year, I was asked to do a series of lectures on the history of astrology. And so I developed a simple course, which each
Ah,
part each
yes,
part is about 10,000 words. So those together would make a short book, but I've been thinking of combining that with some other theme into a fourth volume, basically. So It doesn't pretend to break new ground the way my individual essays do. It
Okay.
just is a kind of a simple teaching guide to the important figures in the history of Western astrology, where when they were living, what publications they're best known for, and so on.
And you can buy this course on your homepage.
I think no, not on my homepage. No, the course is only available. It's just, I mean, the actual course, it's available as an audio-visual version, which was the original form in which it was created, from the website of Andrea Gertz, who was
Where
the
is that?
host.
Where is that on your homepage?
I don't think oh, there it is. Yes, under about, there's a link to it there.
David
Just
the Yellow Duckling?
no,
This one?
above David the Duckling. No, that's something which is totally
This
unrelated to
one?
astrology.
This one?
Yes, that's it. Yes.
And where do we find how we can buy it?
Just above it says recordings of all five classes can now be purchased from her website here. If you scroll just down to the next paragraph,
Oh,
that's it.
here it is.
That's
Okay.
it.
So you should change your how to get attention because I would have read over that. So here is the homepage where you can buy the Philip Graves courses,
Yeah.
five of them. Okay. So let's get rid of that. So let's get back to the homepage. Okay, this is a rather large homepage. This is probably the most important section. The services, what you do. You offer services. One can do literary research for other people. So
Hmm.
if I'm interested in doing research and I'm too lazy, I call you up and say, do it for me, and I pay you £50 per hour.
Not necessarily if you're too lazy, but if you don't have access to all the same sources and you need access to ones that you don't have, and it's better value for you in terms of your
Would you
time.
decline me if I'm lazy?
I wouldn't question, I wouldn't dream of suggesting that it was laziness was a motivation for any researcher who approaches me.
Well, basically, some people are lazy, myself included. And if I have the opportunity, well, I won't be able to pay you because I'm not rich. But there might be rich people saying, okay, 20 hours or 30 hours of research, and I can sip my coffee on my couch while he is working for me. Would you do that?
If I have time, it's all these things are subject to my schedule. At the moment, I have very little time because I've got this big project for the
Okay.
Astrological Association
Okay.
ongoing, and then I have my books to complete. So these are things which are more available in the background. And if people approach me with a project, I can decide on a case by case basis whether it's something I have time for at that moment or
Okay.
not.
So we can download something. Okay, there's digital download card, my downloads. Now this is something for people who have downloaded something already. Where do they download
You
from?
click directly on downloads itself on the top level item.
Ah, that's very hidden. Okay. So they can astrological books in digital file download and it costs a sort of amount of money. And this is here. Oh, that's cheap.
It
That's
depends on the length of the book and
yeah.
how much
Uh,
it costs in the first place to some
how
extent.
how many books are you offering at the moment?
There are about 300, that
They're all
includes,
they're all here.
yeah, they're all on those 5 pages. If you scroll down, there are 60 books per page and there are 5 pages, so you can
So
click
you
to the
go
next
on the
numbers.
second page and file. Okay, so people can buy digital files
Yeah,
on this download thing. And then you have a bookshop. You have a bookshop for used books because you have
yes.
duplicates. Now, where is that? My book.
Again, the top level item, you have to get the top level item to get to the main
You
book
hide
page.
these things. Why do you hide these things? I would never have looked it up here. Okay, astrology bookshops rare and second hand, and there you can buy books.
Yes,
And
yeah.
Chris Brennan was mentioning that he got a very rare book by buying it from you. And there
Mhm.
are so for the last part of this very nice interview with you, let's get to some German books you have prepared for us.
That's right.
So I go out of the screen now. Start talking about the books you have prepared for us.
Okay, so I thought it might be fun for your German listeners if I brought a few of the more interesting German books that I've collected for the library over the years. So I'll start with Reinhold Ebertin because he's obviously very well known. I've got here, I don't know the best way to hold these up to the screen, but these are two very
Yeah,
early editions of
Kombination
Kombination
der
der
Gestirneinflüsse und die Kombination der Gestirneinflüsse, both old
Yeah,
editions. Okay,
they're both they both predate the early 1950s hardback edition, which is the
yes,
kind of the official first edition, so to speak. But these ones are before that, and I think they're from the late 40s,
okay,
and they're in this kind of typescript where it looks as though they were directly reproduced from the original cards that were sold for a very, very limited time just before the outbreak of the war.
okay.
Um, and I think all the cards that hadn't been sold by 1941 were confiscated by the Nazi regime when Eberton was arrested around May 1941. So only about three sets survived that had already been passed on to his associates before he was arrested, and he was able to then to reproduce the content into these little
Yeah,
books after the
that
war.
gives me additional question. Volker Lechler was doing his PhD on the history of astrology in the Weimar Republic. It was
Yeah.
published a few months ago. Do you already have it?
Yes. Sorry, is that's the one that was published as a book a few months ago? Yes,
Yes,
it's an amazing looking book. It's certainly far more comprehensive as a discussion of the history of astrology in Germany in the early 20th century than any I've seen before.
yes.
One of the sources that certainly English speaking astrologers have relied on previously on that period was Urania's Children by Elik Howe, which was published in 1967, and it gives quite a bit of detail, but in a very condensed format, whereas this new book you mentioned is very, very much more comprehensive and detailed. So it's a great breakthrough, I would say, in access to the history, to an account of the history of that time.
You are one of the very few people who bought my book. Do you
I've
know?
got that here too. Excuse me, if I just
No, it's no. You don't have to. You don't have to get it. Don't bother because I see you can see it here. You got this one.
right.
Yeah, you got the big one. This is the first edition of Apokryphen Astrologie, and this contains Süddeutsche Monatshefte von 1927. The second edition, which is for free, everybody can download it from here, is without that very important. It's 680 pages for free, and you bought it. How did it come about that you heard about it? Because it was only, but I think we had only 40 prints of this
Yes, well,
thing.
it was luck really, because just at the time that I was getting to the point of being ready to start collecting German books to expand my collection. I went online to Astronova, and it was among the more expensive books listed there, and it just sounded
It was 150, 55 euros. Yes, it
yes.
was the most expensive one. That's
So
right.
I was intrigued because generally speaking, though it's not a hard and fast rule, the more expensive books tend to be the more serious ones in terms of the depth and quality of research that goes into them. So I thought I ought to get one, so I did. It was simple as that.
Were you disappointed with the content?
No, no, I thought it was extremely interesting. I mean, as you say, it is an expensive book, and I think if it hadn't been for the fact that I had some savings from my grandmother at that time, I probably would have thought twice before paying that much. But I'm glad I got it. So
So everybody can get a part of it, two-thirds of it. There are some important things not in there. The Star Baby is not in the second edition.
right.
The Süddeutsche Monatsheft is not in the second edition. But there is some interesting texts from all the authors. Peter Niehinge, The Art of Synthesis. Christoph Schubert-Weller, Astrology and Science. Simone Egers, a Master of Arts, text of modern astrology in the religious present times, and Gustav Adolf Schöner, Astrology as Religion. Well, they can, all the people viewing this can look it up for themselves and download it for free, but I was intrigued that you had it. I didn't know that.
Yes, yes. No, it was just one of those fortunate things. And I think sometime after that, I connected with Reinhard Stieler on Facebook, and through him, I met you on Facebook in the early
Yeah.
2010s.
Yes, okay. So back to your books you prepared for us.
Right, let's go to the next one. So this I believe is the first book by Karl Brandepracht, one of the most important. So it's
Yeah, Karl
over.
Wandler was very
Yeah,
important author of the 20th century, beginning 20th century.
exactly. And this was his first book in 1905. That's the first edition. So that's before he started working um, for the Astrologisches Bibliothek series, which I think he started working for them. And his books were published from 1910 onwards, but this was 5 years earlier. So this was really a time when there were very few new books on astrology being published in Germany at all. So he was one of the pioneers of the revival, in my opinion.
That gives me a question for your library. If somebody wants to come to your place and look those books up, which you are just showing us,
Yeah.
how much do you charge?
That's a good question. I don't make a fixed charge. I invite donations from people who visit because I'm aware that everybody has a different level of means, and some people just donating £10 or £20, that would be the most they could afford. Whereas some researchers who travel from a long way to do a serious bit of research for academia, for instance, they might be able to afford a couple of £100. So it's entirely individual.
What was the most income you had from one of those researchers in the last 5 years?
That would probably be a couple of £100
Okay,
from
so it's
visitor.
between 20 pounds and 500 pounds.
It's never been more than £200.
Ah, okay, okay. So back to the books. Okay.
Okay, sure. Next one. So this is I might have shown this actually on the Ad Astra podcast. This is Heinrich Grandsire's
Yes, very good.
Tractatus Astrologicus, and this is the second edition of 1594. I don't know if you can see the
That's
date
very,
there.
very impressive. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
And the thing about this edition, which I cottoned on to,
Just a second. And
sorry,
at the moment, you have the original Regulus edition of William Lilly's Christian Astrology, right?
the
For sa
original.
for sale.
Oh, I've got a second edition from 1659 for sale. Yes, because I've also got a first
No,
edition
no, I mean
in
the Regulus edition of
of
1980.
1985. Oh, I've got multiple copies of that for sale in my shop. Yes.
So people who want to have the Regulus edition, which is the famous leather-bound edition,
Yeah. Well, it's actually cloth, but imitation leather. It looks
yeah,
like leather, but it isn't.
and this is available in your shop at the moment. The Christian Astrology of William Lilly. This was 1985, I believe.
That's right. Yeah.
And how much do you charge for that?
It depends on the copy and the condition. It's become a very, very collectible book. And at the time that I put those copies up for sale, the cheapest copy I could see for sale online was £515. And I've gone below that, but not a lot below. So my copies vary from £350 to £500.
Okay, so people who want the real Lilly Regulus edition, they can get it from you.
They can at the moment. That's
Okay,
right.
back to your books.
Okay. So I was just saying that I cottoned on to the 1594 edition because when I read James Herschel Holden's History of Horoscopic Astrology, he mentioned that the second edition had almost twice the number of pages as the first. He also said it was the basis for all subsequent editions, but I noticed in library records that the later editions have only sort of 320 pages. So I think they must have been reset if they were based on the text of the second edition, but still had all of it. So that's just a minor point about that. Um, I've also brought another book of yours here just for fun. That's Scientific Fraud Against Astrology.
And that's from myself, yeah.
That's right, in English.
You
Perhaps,
can't buy that anymore.
perhaps you might want to mention a bit about the background to that while I fetch the next one.
No.
You don't want to? Okay, fine. We'll skip that then. Let's go on to the next one.
But it's interesting that you have it because I had a lot of books published, and then I realized there are some legal problems with what I did with those books, so
Oh,
I
okay.
don't
Well, then we don't
know.
need to go into that further. This one is Astrologisches Taschenbuch für das Jahr um, uh, 1822, I suppose you would say.
Astrologisches Taschenbuch für das Jahr 1822. Yes, and
And that's by,
that's Pfaff. That's the famous professor of Nuremberg
yeah,
who published an astrology manual in 1816. Do you have his manual from 1816 as well?
no, unfortunately, it's my one major lack from that period, really, to this day.
Okay.
And I know that one of the academic historians active in Germany bought an original of that at auction a few years ago because he mentioned it on the podcast
Yes,
with
yes.
Helena and Luis. So, but
I think you can read it in the original in some of the libraries of Germany, I
mm,
believe. I'm not sure about that. But anyways,
but
yeah,
I thought,
Pfaff is very
yeah,
important for the in-between time because he was the only academic of the University of Erlangen-Nuremberg, or in those days of Nuremberg, I believe. And his story is a very interesting one. And in the Ad Astra project, you
mm,
find a video by Professor Günther Oestmann talking
that's
about
right,
Pfaff, which is
yeah.
very, very good to look at.
And I think he was the one who purchased the original at auction.
Could be, yeah,
I think
could
it
be.
was Wilhelm Wulff's personal copy.
Oh, okay.
Wilhelm Wulff, who was one of the astrologers who is said to have had some sort of employment by the Nazi regime at one
Yeah,
point. I know some of them were constrained into doing that. I don't remember his particular story, but
yeah.
so that's a sort of association copy of Pfaff's book. Um,
Okay.
I've got one more. Oh yes, I wanted to mention about the Jahrbuch that it was one of two Jahrbooks, which both over 200 pages long, that
Okay, just
Pfaff.
to stop you there for a second, we have it here. Johann Wilhelm Pfaff's Astrologie, 1816, with no, I don't want to do that. Here we have it, and here it is. This is a lot of advertisement with YouTube again, which is horrible, but we will get there, hopefully. Come on. This is not nice. It's the Ad Astra project, and if you research search it on the YouTube search thing, Johann Wilhelm Pfaff's Astrologie 1816 with Günther. Why is this advertisement so long?
I don't know. I don't know what's happened there. But in any case, I hope that the video hasn't been corrupted and is still available. It might
It
be
is still
something.
available, yeah.
Yeah, it might just be an advertisement, as you say.
It's just well, we just continue with the books as long as this advertisement runs. So you were saying,
Yes, I was saying that the Taschen book that I showed you from a few years later, that was one of two in successive years that Pfaff wrote, and in each of them he serializes 50% of his own translation of Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos into German. So that was their first appearance. The first appearance of his translation of Ptolemy was in those two Taschen books, and I've only got one of the two Taschen books, but I do have reprints of his translation because about 100 years later, I think it was reprinted by Hubert Korsch um,
okay, okay,
around the 1930s.
Jesus Christ, this is
There's one more book. Are you ready for me to carry
yeah,
on
yes, yes.
to that one? And this is just before Brandenburg. There's this interesting character called
Now stop. We are here. Okay,
yeah.
so here you find it. This is Dr. Günther Öst, Professor Dr. Günther Östmann. He is living in northern Germany, and he was interviewed by Helena Avila and Luis Ribeiro about Professor Pfaff,
Mhm.
and I can recommend that. And now we go back for the last book. Okay.
Okay, so before Brandenburg, as you'll be aware, there was a huge lull after Pfaff, or Pfaff, as you said, was really in isolation in his time
Yes, he was.
within Germany in writing on astrology and having books and published, and even his translation of Ptolemy being published. That was quite out of character for Germany at the time.
Yes.
But
He got
then,
a little bit of trouble in his university with his public.
yeah, but then at the very end of the 19th century, something seems to be changing. Well, it seemed to be changing faster in other parts of continental Europe, where in France, for instance, you start having people like Elie Starr writing various books at the end of the 20th, sorry, the end of the 19th century. But it's not really until we get Branda Pracht appearing in 1905 that we really count there being a proper revival in German astrology. However, there was one earlier character called Gustav Wilhelm Gessmann, I believe. And this is a book of his called Catechismus.
Katechismus der Sterndeutekunst von G.W. Gessmann.
That's right. And this is the first,
And der Barth Verlag in Munich, I believe.
yeah. And I think he was a librarian, but this was published in Berlin in 1896.
Okay.
So it's actually earlier than Branda Pracht's work
Yes, it
by
is.
nine
Yes.
years.
I didn't know that. Very interesting. Yeah.
So I think, and he wrote a whole series of books on different esoteric topics, including graphology, I believe, and palmistry as well. So
Okay.
I think he was a librarian. He was just very motivated to compile all the knowledge he had found in these old libraries into modern guides. And I think that probably helped to kickstart um, the German astrological revival movement, although it only kind of really obviously gains ground a few years later. So,
Okay, coming back to your present situation, in one of the videos you were mentioning that it is necessary that the Astrological Association of Great Britain and yourself find a new building for all the books because you only have one private room left, which is your sleeping room.
yeah,
How
in the
is
long
that
run.
project in the long term? Do you think it's going to be?
It remains to be seen, as all I can say. I mean, there's nothing underway to actually formalize that project at the moment, and that's partly because there are various preconditions for making it happen. Um, for instance, in order to actually attract institutional funding, I would need to put my own collection over to institutional ownership, which would probably mean establishing a trust, and there are costs and legalities involved in that.
Yes.
So it's something that I haven't got around to yet. But I do want I do want certainly my collection to continue beyond my lifetime as a usable research and reference resource, which is going to allow the resources I built up to continue to be used both for scholarly purposes and for just private research purposes by astrologers far into the future. It would just feel like a great shame if it all just got dissolved and the books scattered far and wide again beyond my lifetime.
Basically, what I see is a lot of astrologers on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok, where I'm not. I'm only on
Yes.
Facebook. And what I see is a selfish community who doesn't support the people who need the support.
Well,
You don't have to answer
mm,
that. No, don't I don't want to get you into trouble.
no,
But basically, my opinion of the astrology communities worldwide is a bunch of selfish idiots. But that's my opinion, and I'm stopping reading astrology after the 13th century, anyways. So,
okay.
did I miss to ask you something important?
I can't think of anything obvious, Volker. We've had a good long chat and we've covered a good wide range of ground, and
And
you've
you
asked
are
some,
content with what we did?
yes, yes, no, you've asked some good probing questions as you always do. So I hope there's something in this that your listeners will find new and interesting and worthwhile.
And this time you can do with the material whatever you want on your channel. You can upload it.
So,
It might get more views on your channel than on mine. As I mentioned, I'm a niche channel. The best I have is on the astrology side. I have a health side, which is a different story. There I have 12,000 clicks
ah,
on Professor Hollis on vitamin D. But on the astrology side, on my former channel, Helena Avila was the top running with 1800 clicks, but that was all. And normally a video like this is in the hundreds between 100 and 500. So don't expect to be famous overnight of this video, except if you put it on your channel, nobody knows.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I don't have a very active YouTube channel. I posted a few things there from time to
Yeah.
time, but I've just
Okay.
been too busy with
Yes.
research and with
Okay.
other
Yeah.
things. So
So we all, viewers and myself, we thank you very much for taking a long time to do this talk with me. And thanks for the views. Danke fürs Vorbeischauen und auf bald und I stop the recording.